Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I never imagined my life would become the kind of story people whisper about behind closed doors. I was the picture-perfect wife in a picture-perfect marriage, or at least that's what I told myself for years. I'm 32 female, and I've been married to my now ex-husband, Alex, 34 male, for nearly 7 years. We have a 4-year-old daughter together, and up until a few months ago, I lived in the shadow of the powerful, wealthy family I married into. To the outside world, the M family, my in-laws, are the definition of upper-class success. They own multiple businesses across retail and logistics, live in a mansion just outside the city, and vacation in places I used to only see in magazines. When I married Alex, I didn't come for money, but I brought loyalty, love, and an unwavering belief in building a life together. I supported him when he worked 70-hour weeks. I helped host corporate dinners. I played the doting wife and perfect daughter-in-law at every turn. But what I didn't know was that behind the curated Instagram-worthy life, behind the private schooling and tailored suits, was a level of rot I never could have anticipated. It started with the little things. Alex was distant, short-tempered. He suddenly cared too much about how he looked when going out with the guys, despite not having spoken about his friends in months. He was glued to his phone, started locking it, and got defensive when I asked simple questions. I confronted him gently at first. He gaslit me, told me I was paranoid, that I was projecting my own insecurities. I was still in therapy after a traumatic miscarriage the year before, and he used that to weaponize my emotional state against me. I started doubting myself, but the truth came out one morning when he left his Apple Watch charging in the kitchen. A text popped up from someone saved as K. I didn't plan to snoop, but my heart told me I had to look. And there it was. Dozens of messages, explicit photos, plans to spend the night at the hotel again. My world collapsed in that instant. I confronted him that night, expecting shame, maybe tears, maybe a desperate apology. What I got instead was coldness. He didn't deny it. He barely flinched. He said, "I'm not happy. I haven't been for a while." Like our daughter didn't exist. Like I hadn't given him my entire youth. Like I was just some disposable phase in his life. I told him I was going to tell his parents. That was my first mistake. The very next morning, I was called to the family estate, a sprawling home with manicured lawns, servants, and an air of quiet menace. His parents, Richard and Simone, were waiting for me in the drawing room like a scene out of a legal drama. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask how their granddaughter was. Instead, they handed me a folder. Inside was a legal draft agreement. It said that if I spoke publicly about the affair, to friends, online, in court, I'd be sued for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They had already lined up a lawyer. Simone's brother, a ruthless family law barrister, had drawn up everything. They told me this was my warning, that if I caused a scandal, they'd drag me through court. They had money. They had influence. I had nothing. Then came the manipulation. Richard looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Do you really want to destroy your daughter's future over a little mistake? Think about what this will do to her. You won't win." I left shaking. That night I cried in the bathtub until my skin pruned and the water turned cold. I felt cornered, humiliated, and powerless. What I didn't know was that someone else in the family was watching all of this. Alex's younger brother, Matthew, 30M. He and I had always gotten along, unusually well considering the rest of the family never truly accepted me. He was the quiet one, studious, always working in the background. While the rest of them threw lavish parties and flaunted wealth, Matthew managed the books and logistics for the family's various businesses. One night, a few days after the confrontation, Matthew asked to meet for coffee. I expected him to beg me to keep quiet like the others. Instead, he looked me in the eye and said, "You don't deserve this, and you're not crazy. They're scared because they know how fragile the house of cards is." And then he told me everything. For the last 5 years, the family had been engaged in an elaborate VAT fraud scheme. multiple shell companies, fake invoices, inflated purchase records, all designed to either avoid paying VAT or claim fraudulent refunds. They were funneling the money through offshore accounts and using dummy vendors registered under staff names to cycle funds back into the main companies. It was millions, and I mean millions, in stolen taxpayer money. Matthew had discovered the extent of it recently, but had been too afraid to come forward. They had him sign off on documents under duress. He was complicit on paper, even if he hadn't orchestrated it. And now that they were threatening me, he said it had gone too far. I was stunned. Betrayal was already thick in the air, but this? This was a different level of corruption. They were criminals, not just morally bankrupt people, but actual criminals playing Monopoly with real families' tax money. I couldn't sleep for days after that. I had two choices: walk away quietly and take whatever scraps of settlement they offered, or do what I knew in my bones was right, even if it burned bridges I once thought were unbreakable. I started collecting evidence. With Matthew's help, I was able to get copies of falsified invoices, proof of ghost vendors, bank statements linking the transfers, and even audio recordings of meetings where Richard joked about squeezing the system dry. I consulted with a whistleblower lawyer. I gave everything to the authorities, the HMRC and the Serious Fraud Office. Then I waited. The fallout came fast and hard. It's been 4 weeks since the initial raid. HMRC descended on the M family's offices and seized dozens of computers and files. The news broke shortly after. Prominent business family under investigation for massive VAT fraud. Richard and Simone have both been charged. Alex, too, given he was listed as CEO on several of the businesses, even if he didn't do the day-to-day work. Their passports have been confiscated. Bail was posted, but their accounts are frozen. The media has been relentless. The once pristine M family name is now synonymous with white-collar crime. Matthew is cooperating fully and is expected to receive leniency in exchange for his role as a whistleblower. And me? I've been called everything from a hero to a vengeful witch. The worst part isn't even the tabloids. It's the personal attacks. My in-laws, even from under legal scrutiny, have made it clear they blame me for destroying the family. Simone apparently said that I had no soul for doing this to my daughter's father. Alex's sister, who barely spoke to me before, wrote an open post on Facebook about how bitter exes can't handle being left and weaponized the system to punish good men. People I once called friends have gone radio silent. I've been accused of using Matthew, of ruining lives because I couldn't keep my marriage together. They act like the real crime is that I didn't roll over and stay quiet for the sake of family appearances. But I look at my daughter, bright-eyed, full of promise, and I know I couldn't let her grow up in a family where silence was currency and morality was negotiable. I've moved in with my sister while the legal proceedings play out. There's talk of restitution, possibly even jail time for Richard and Alex. I've filed for full custody. I don't want my daughter raised in a family where criminal behavior is normalized and covered with gold-plated lies. I want her to know that you don't let people threaten you into silence. That truth matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And yet, a part of me still aches. I didn't want any of this. I didn't marry for money. I didn't report them to be vindictive. I wanted to protect myself, and by extension, my child. But the guilt lingers. The weight of being the one who exposed it all sits heavy. So Reddit. Am I an a-hole for reporting my husband and his family for fraud after they threatened to ruin me for speaking about his affair? OP is not the a-hole. Let me get this straight. They threatened her into silence about her husband's affair after betraying her trust. And now they're clutching their pearls because OOP refused to be their scapegoat while they committed tax fraud on a multi-million-dollar scale. That's not cruelty. That's accountability. These people don't care about family or OOP's daughter. They care about their empire and keeping OP quiet. OP didn't destroy anything. She exposed what was already rotten. OP's daughter will grow up with the most important legacy of all, the truth, not the a-hole. They underestimated you. That's really the core of it. They thought you'd cry, beg, disappear quietly. But you flipped the script and brought down an entire web of corruption. That's not just brave, that's heroic. They made a choice to steal from the public, and they made a choice to threaten and gaslight the mother of their grandchild. Now they're mad they couldn't bully you into silence. Let them scream family while they sit in court. You chose integrity. Don't look back. This reads like a Netflix docuseries, and I'd binge every episode. You are 1000% not the a-hole. If anything, you gave your ex and in-laws more grace than they deserved. They didn't think twice about threatening the mother of their granddaughter. But you're the cruel one? Please. The mental gymnastics are Olympic level. They weren't protecting a legacy. They were protecting their stolen money. And frankly, they should be thanking you. Prison might be the only place they learn humility. Not the a-hole. If it were the other way around, if you were the one cheating and committing fraud, do you honestly think your ex or in-laws would have protected you out of love for your child? Absolutely not. They'd have fed you to the wolves and called it doing what's best for the family. You stood up for yourself in the face of threats, lies, and manipulation. That's not just admirable. That's the kind of example your daughter deserves. You didn't burn the bridge. They blew it up with arrogance and greed.
My 28 female, fiancé E, 30 male, was willing to sell his BMW to my half-brother, 18 male, at market price because he said he really wanted it. E was not looking to sell it and had just had major work done. For context, E has 3 cars. They are all nice sports cars. E agreed to the down payment amount and was fine accepting payments for the rest at a rate my brother could afford. He also knew the fuel pump would need to be replaced and agreed to cover that when the time came. After taking possession of the car, my dad looked up KBB and thought the price was too high. Instead of calling E, he called and complained to me multiple times and said E was a crappy partner for not giving my family a deal, even though E thought he was. E saw me crying after a phone call with my dad, so E called him. Since all the conversations had been between E and my brother, and my dad and me, this was their first time talking about the car. On the call, my dad presented his perspective to E and asked what he would do if it was his kid. E responded that he would have been more involved from the beginning. My dad didn't let E talk after that and said he was selfish and untrustworthy. Said he couldn't trust him to take care of his family or me. Given the drama, E agreed to take the car back and went to pick it up immediately. He returned the deposit and paid brother for washing it and changing the oil. This was about 4 days after he had delivered the car. E and I are planning a wedding after 7 years together and 6 living together. After this call, my dad thought E owed him an apology, and vice versa. I sided with E since my dad was the one that was hurtful in my opinion and seeing malice where there was none. When I spoke to him, he unpromptedly said that he was fine not being a part of my wedding if E wasn't going to apologize. I believe this was manipulative and planned to hold him to it, even though it's really hard for me to picture the day without him, and I know this won't be easily undone. We are currently low contact. He doesn't think I see E clearly, even though he has never made an effort to get to know E. For context, E and I both make good money, so he thinks we could have afforded and should have given my younger brother a better than market deal. E believes he puts a lot of time and energy into maintaining his cars, and he has no need to sell it. So why would he sell it for less than what it is worth? E is a homebody, and so is my dad, so they both point to the other to why they don't have a relationship. I often go to family events alone, which I prefer over forcing E to give up limited free time doing something I enjoy, that he doesn't. He does attend the major holidays, but not for a lazy Sunday like I do, since my family is very close and my brothers are still young. Am I the a-hole if I hold my dad to his threat, given how disrespectful and hurtful he is being? Not the a-hole. Your dad is a jerk, should be treated like one. He can feel free to chip in his own money for your brother's car if he feels so strongly about it. Hell no, you're not the a-hole. Far as I'm concerned, tell Dad to kick ducking rocks and leave you two alone. If he thinks he's some kind of car whiz, why did he even have your brother looking for a car? He should have been able to spot a better deal in a few minutes, if he was that friggin' smart. Get him and his advice pushing ways out of your relationship. Hell, send him a picture of you two at your wedding with a caption saying, "Glad you weren't here to comparison shop this." Not the a-hole. However, think further than just the wedding. You said that you like to go to your parents' house for lazy Sundays. That sounds like a pretty good relationship with your parents. Think it might get awkward if your dad is excluded from your wedding? He doesn't need to apologize, but you shouldn't hold your dad to it either. If your dad decides on his own to exclude himself from the wedding over this, he's the a-hole for sure. If you exclude him from the wedding, you will be the a-hole in the eyes of your family. Just ignore the whole thing and let it play out however it does. I, 20 female, collect jewelry as a hobby, and my family was fortunate enough to support that hobby. I mainly try to choose more low-key, less popular pieces, rather than ones that are more recognizable, i.e., the Cartier Love Bracelet. Typically, for my everyday jewelry, I wear 2 Van Cleef bracelets, a few simple gold plus diamond thin rings, and a diamond pendant. I add or subtract a watch, more necklaces, etc. as needed. I would estimate the total cost of what I wear every day to be around $40K. Total cost of my jewelry collection altogether, probably around $120K. I know that I'm incredibly fortunate to be given this by my parents, but it's not an incredibly uncommon thing in our community. Rolex for middle school graduation, Birkin for 16th birthday, BMW when you get your license type environment. So I could wear jewelry to high school and it'd be pretty normal, considering the other girls in our grade did too. At college, I met a lot of new people from different backgrounds, which was eye-opening. I've learned more about privilege and the experiences of other people on the other end of the wealth spectrum. I try not to blatantly show off our wealth, and certainly don't want to make any classmates feel lesser for something entirely out of their control. If I wear a noticeably branded or prominent piece, if asked, I'll just say it's fake or something like that. I don't use expensive bags or wear designer clothing, but jewelry is a very personal thing for me, and most of my pieces are quite sentimental. The jewelry I wear every day is pretty low-key. It's not like paved diamonds everywhere, and arguably the average person wouldn't know the price tag. We had a discussion in class once about socioeconomic status, privilege, etc., and one of my classmates, M, who has spoken at length about her family's financial hardship, called me out, saying, "I think that it's disgusting that Amy, fake name for myself, can morally wear all that jewelry, knowing that people are dying. Like, put that money towards charity. It's unfair and, honestly, in such bad taste." She went on, but that's a snippet that's more relevant than the rest. I was embarrassed, but I didn't want more conflict, so I didn't respond. It did make class incredibly uncomfortable for me for the rest of the year, specifically because I got some anonymous online harassment over it afterwards. And I have found a lot less joy in jewelry as a result. I stopped wearing much, if at all, most days. I won't sell it because most pieces are tied to important days or events of my life, graduation, major accomplishments, etc. My parents think that I should wear it because they paid so much for it, which is valid, but I feel like M might be right that it's just too insensitive. Would I be the a-hole for wearing jewelry to my college classes? Whenever we are in person again. Edit. Just to clarify, the class wasn't about socioeconomic status and privilege. We just had a discussion about it as a facet of the course. Not the a-hole. I think it would be a bigger waste of money to not wear the things you've bought for what it's worth. And I think it was in worse taste of M to call you out as disgusting for wearing jewelry, knowing that people are dying. I'd assume, though, that it came from a place of jealousy at someone who hasn't been through the same financial hardships as she has. You've mentioned you try not to flaunt it, and that specifically the pieces are mostly tied to milestones, so I don't think it's wrong of you to wear the jewelry you own. Listen, I want to say not the a-hole so bad, but you're literally wearing more wealth in jewelry on any given day than the average person in the US makes in a year. It's really something worth thinking about. It's also worth noting that while this girl did say some harsh things that were over the line, you wore $40,000 in jewelry, which you traded out daily, to a class where you were discussing socioeconomic status and privilege. What were you expecting, honestly? The easy thing right now will be to stay in your wealth bubble and let the meanness of those words eat at you and get bitter about being made to feel embarrassed and uncomfortable. The hard, but infinitely more worthwhile thing is to dig in and learn more about class structure, privilege, white supremacy, racism, colonialism, and what circumstances made it so you're in your place and others are in their place. You were born into gifts you did not have to earn. You have the power to use those gifts to make the world a better place. Most charities are honestly put in place so people who have the system rigged for them can throw a little money into them in order to not feel guilty about playing a game that gives them twice the rolls, while some people have to roll doubles to count it all. We have to change the rules of the game, and we have to dismantle systems that make rich people richer. I had a fling with a woman 24 years ago, and that resulted in a pregnancy. I absolutely had no intention of being with her, but I intended to be a hands-on father. She's basically trailer trash. We have always had a contentious relationship, and maybe I made the mistake of not being as forceful as I should have been with her, but I wanted to spare my son of watching his parents tear each other apart. Despite this, he was a really good kid until middle school. He had two polar opposite parents to rebel against, and he decided to rebel against me. My relationship with him became as contentious as with his mother. The only thing that remained positive was that he was very good with his younger half-brothers and my other wife. But it's hard trying to straighten out your kid when his mom is working against you. By middle school, he chose to stay with his mother 6 out of 7 days a week. I just didn't have the same influence on him as she did. He dropped out of high school when he was 16, and that broke my heart, because I have both a BA and MA. Then he entered into his D phase for a few years that nearly killed him. I paid $40,000 for him to go to rehab at 22. Sad part was that he was the youngest patient by far, and when I went to visit him, people saw me as the a-hole parent because he had nothing, and I drove a BMW. That's what happens when you sell everything for D. The only consolation was that they thought he might have borderline personality disorder. I still pay for his Suboxone. We had a few therapy sessions with his mother, and they both ganged up on me and blamed me for his being an addict, when the reality is that he wasn't using or acting out when he was with me. When he got out, he disappointed me again by moving in with his mother, who was an enabler. Both are skilled manipulators. I just couldn't focus all my energy on him, so we became estranged. He recently reached out to me for money for dental work, and I am shocked about his appearance. He's almost 25, but looks 40, smokes a lot, drinks a lot, and has a ton of guns. I agreed to pay a dentist to fix his teeth and told him I was concerned for his well-being. That caused him to go off on me. I asked him if he was done, and he said he was. I said, "All I have to say is that I hope you don't end up a loser like your mother," and hung up. Obviously, holding back isn't working. Edit. I have never called my son's mother trailer trash to anyone but my wife. Edit. I did speak to my son today. I told him I am exhausted trying to help him straighten out his life, especially when he has so much potential. I told him that I will help him, however, I am putting limits on that. Yes, I will pay for his dental work and Suboxone, but he is going to have to start accepting consequences. All he said, sarcastically, was, "Gee, thanks, Dad." Then I realized I'm dealing with a borderline personality, and maybe I should just give up. Yes, the a-hole. She's loser trailer trash that you didn't want to be with, but you had no problems having S with her. You pass all the blame and take none of the responsibility. Yes, the a-hole. You say you didn't want your kid to be raised with parents that hate each other, but the way you talk about the mother is appalling. Trailer trash? Loser? Really? You're the one who got her pregnant. There's no doubt in my mind your son picked up on these feelings from the get-go. Not gonna lie, you're painting yourself as a parent who pays for things and then acts as though they've done their duty as a parent. You say you've tried hard, but don't mention anything you've done to keep him around. You're a parent, so act like one. Your child is obviously struggling with addiction and severe mental health issues, and you cannot muster any empathy towards him? Maybe self-reflect a bit. Regardless, I don't think it would have helped at all that you clearly despise his mother. You call her trailer trash. You think your son didn't pick up on your feelings towards her as a child? Kids aren't dumb. He likely saw your nice house and wife and kids and went back to his mother, whom I'm assuming is poor, and quite easily noted the difference. Your disdain for his mother would likely, in his mind, have passed on to him. Calling his mother a loser. What will that do except drive home to him that his dad thinks he's trash? Yes, the a-hole, to be honest. Try hard to have a real conversation with your son and work on your classism and superiority. I, 41 male, own my own business. Suffice to say, it's a 30 to 50 person office, depending on the season, and we do pretty well. We are essential, so almost all employees have been in the office during the row. My wife, 28 female, we will call her Diane, works in my office, but is almost 8 months pregnant and due to some complications, not too serious, has been on leave for the past 2 months. I have a secretary, Laura, who is a little bit younger than my wife and has not been with us long. Laura has done a good job, and frankly, being my assistant isn't the easiest job. There is some downtime though, and one day a few weeks ago, I happened to notice Laura browsing the Victoria's Secret website. I really have no problem with personal internet use at work when it doesn't interfere with work, And again, Laura does a good job. However, I couldn't help but tease her a little bit about this. So occasionally I will say something like, "Can you get me those reports?" That is, if you're done shopping at Victoria's Secret. Laura laughs and we all move on with our lives. Last week was Secretary's Day. I gave Laura cash, but I couldn't resist also buying a small online gift card to Victoria's Secret. I put this in the card with cash, and Laura thought it was funny. Well, I bought the card with my company card. It's my company, so that's not a big deal. However, my wife still checks her work email, and one of her jobs was to track company card spending. Sure enough, she got an email stating that I had bought a Victoria's Secret gift card. When I got home, she immediately confronted me. I told her that I got it for Laura and explained the joke. With all due respect, my wife lost her mind. She started screaming at me, telling me that I had disrespected her for the last time. She actually said I should sleep with Laura. I mean, Laura is attractive enough, but I have no interest in being with anyone besides my wife. She would not hear any of this. Screamed at me in the house, got into my BMW, kept screaming at me from the car, and then drove away. I haven't heard from her in 24 hours, but her sister did send me an email saying she was staying with her. This all came out of nowhere, and it seems a total overreaction to what was a harmless joke. But she was so upset that I'm wondering if this crossed some line. Again, Laura laughed and had no issue with it. Am I the a-hole? Yes, the a-hole. Making repeated comments to your subordinates about buying underwear is extremely inappropriate and unprofessional, let alone giving them a gift card to buy underwear. That's borderline S harassment. Nothing borderline about it. It is straight up S harassment. When your boss jokes with you about your underwear buying, you have zero way of telling him you're uncomfortable, and she is totally uncomfortable. And with physical evidence like this, she should probably sue very successfully. Let's break down all the reasons why you are such a massive yes the a-hole. You start off telling us that your wife, who is 28 years old, is 8 months pregnant, but due to complications has been off work for the past 2 months. You said it wasn't anything too serious. But a 28-year-old woman would not be told to stop working at 6 months if it wasn't serious. You immediately diminish your wife here. But Laura is younger. You make sure to tell us twice that she does a good job, especially since being your assistant isn't the easiest job. Sounds like being your wife isn't either, but you don't think about or mention that. So you are gracious enough to allow your assistant some downtime to browse the internet, but you make damn sure to let her know that you caught her. And not only that, you remind her often. But it's okay. She laughs, and you all move on. But you didn't move on. Case in point, on Secretary's Day, you got your secretary an extremely inappropriate gift. You said she laughed, but what else is she going to do? You've already admitted that you're difficult. You do understand that subordinates will often say and act in a manner which they feel their boss requires in order to save their job. Also remember, she is young. There are boundaries that need to be adhered to in a work environment. Unless you actually want to have an affair with this girl, and this was your way of telling her. On to your wife. Buying the gift card with your company card while she has been out of work for the past 2 months looks devious and deceitful. Why wouldn't you have discussed this with her first, asked her opinion? It screams infidelity to any woman. Never mind a pregnant woman at home when her husband is in the office with a younger, attractive secretary. The way you describe your wife's reaction is suspicious. It sounds as if this isn't the first time you've done things like this, and you are pretending to be clueless here to gain sympathy. You didn't hear from your wife for 24 hours? What the duck, man? Why didn't you go find her? That is your wife and the mother of your child, and you just treated her so badly. Why on earth mention your BMW? But hey, at the end of your post, all that really matters is that it was a harmless joke, and Laura laughed, right?